Hi, my name is Ejay, and I'm here to review this book called Making Our Neighborhoods Whole. So the book begins with telling the story of the two authors, John M. Perkins Jr. and Wayne Gordon. John and Wayne. You know, their stories are really fascinating because it's such a contrast. You know, John Perkins was growing up from a broken home. He was a cotton picker when he was young, and his family was wrapped up with a lot of tragedy. His mother died from malnutrition, and his father was, in and out of jail, and eventually just abandoned the family. And so he was essentially raised by his grandmother, along with his many siblings. And there was one guy that had a really compelling story of being redeemed by God. It's definitely John Perkins. Talks about, some of the darkest experiences of his life, of not only being taken advantage of by the owners of the fields there where he worked, but also experiencing incredible loss when his brother was killed by police brutality. And so he was one of many voices in the civil rights movement that really sought to advance not just the rights of Black people in America, but also to do it through the lens of being a believer in Christ. Particularly interesting because he was essentially uneducated. I think, from what I recall, he didn't get past 5th grade, which is now amazing because he is the father of many Christian not-for-profits all over America and has earned many honorary doctorates. They don't really talk about it in the book, but I'm kind of a big fan. Now on to Wayne Gordon. He is an Anglo man who grew up in a suburban home, but he's also a demonstration that God can call anyone to do ministry in the city. He had a deep sense of calling to really serve. And it was through his ministry life that he eventually met John. And their friendship is a definite demonstration that Christian brotherhood can really launch new powerful unions within the body of Christ. And their friendship is part of what started the foundation for this organization called the CCDA, the Christian Community Development Association. And so this book is actually partially a credo to their philosophy of ministry, to which they proposed this idea called the 3 R's. The 3 R's are relocation, reconciliation, and redistribution. Sounds nice, doesn't it? As much as the 3 R's are conceptually easy to digest, they are actually explosive ideas. And if there's one thing I'd like to say about this book actually is it's written with an elegant simplicity, but when you start peeling the layers about actually practicing some of the ideas that are being shared here, these are big ideas. I mean, let's take the first tenet, for instance, relocation. So relocation, they segregated even this idea to 3 different subgroups. So within the relocation philosophy, they clarified people who are, 1, relocators are individuals who move in but are not indigenous to the community. 2, returners, people who have left and have returned to the community, or 3, remainers, people who have decided to stay despite having many opportunities to leave. So to them, the idea of relocation is not only powerful just because it changes the tone of how you are addressing the community, but it also shifts your personal pronouns. It goes from them and they into becomes us and we. In the discipline of development, this is kind of a radical idea because now you're shifting to think about work and life and rhythm all simultaneously together. You know, if you think about our Western concept where most people have this rhythm of going to work, going to a foreign neighborhood to do their work and build another sub-community there, built up of other people who come from all sorts of different spheres of life. But what they're proposing here is actually a cohesion of all these worlds, where you live and where you work and the community you build are all centered into one place. You know, it's actually fascinating that this idea seems revolutionary in the world of ministry, because if you think about the incarnation, this is literally what Jesus did. Moved in and was our neighbor, and he essentially lived among the people that he wanted to serve. So if anything, this idea of relocation actually is an incredibly biblical idea, which begs the question, how come so many Christian ministries don't believe in living in the neighborhoods that they serve? Another point to the 3 R's, the second one is reconciliation. Again, another incredibly biblical idea, and so they split it into three tenets. So one would be reconciling with God, reconciling with others, and then groups of people reconciling with other groups of people. Again, the way it's described in the book, it seems so beautiful and academic, but really, you can get lost in the weeds just trying to pull this off. I mean, even the idea of reconciling with God itself, it's not really an easy thing to do, and yet it's important. And to them, it's part of community development, because having a relationship with your Creator is a spiritual outlet to the development of community, that without having a healthy relationship with God, it would be incredibly difficult to have reconciled and healthy relationships with people around you. And then now if you add that to trying to deal with groups of people where now you're trying to deal with systemic issues like racism, it would be impossible, I would think, to do it without having spiritual fuel to help you along the way. Now, as I think about even how they explain about reconciliation, again, probably a common thought that I think about when I read it is, these are such beautiful ideas, but they are so big. You know, it almost makes you think, why should you even bother with having a 3rd R? I mean, even if you're just focused on relocation and reconciliation alone, you could be easily busy. But I guess part of the reason why the 3rd R is necessary is because it would be incomplete. It would be incomplete to only engage someone through the lens of neighbor, and then someone through the lens of reconciling with their spiritual relationship with God and with other people, without actually thinking about the economical ramifications of how things work. Which brings us to the 3rd R. Redistribution. Now, to put it a bit simply, redistribution, in its basic form, according to this book, is split up into this kind of narrative. One is you can give a man a fish and he would eat for one day, or you can teach a man to fish and he would eat for a lifetime. Now, according to the CCDA principle, a third tenet, you let them own the pond. See, owning the pond is about, giving people ownership, and also centered around dignity. It almost makes you think that, having ownership is almost a very humane ideology. That to do that would be restorative to someone's worth, someone's idea of self-worth. That's why I believe this is kind of a beautiful idea. And even if you think about it from a practical standpoint, this is where you would start thinking of avenues of ministry where you do things like social enterprise, where giving people a way to earn a living becomes incredibly important. Giving people a way to even become a business owner becomes incredibly important. In fact, I remember I was able to do a site visit on this place called Homeboy Industries, and our guide was this hot dog stand owner in front, who was named Wei. Wei was absolutely fascinating because he was Chinese American who lived in a poor Latin neighborhood, and so he got into Latino gangs when he was younger because that was the only form of community that was available to him. And it was really interesting when he would tell us the story of Father Boyle, the founder of this organization, who was a priest, and he would tell us how funny it was to see Father Boyle come with his bike and hang out in the barrio and speak to all of them. And it was his love for the community and his love for the neighborhood that really eventually broke down the barriers between all of them. And he said that Father Boyle was one of the first people to not only believe in him and help him get out of this life of violence and brokenness, but also enable him to dream of being a business owner. It was quite amazing to hear him talk about Father Boyle helping him deal with the paperwork of getting a grant and then getting the permits and to be able to help build his hot dog stand. And now he was proudly in front of us as a business owner. In a way, this is really what it looks like to let people own the pond. Let people own the pond. Redistribution is not only an economic issue, but it's also a justice issue. Because if you think about it, I mean, there's a lot of evidence out there that economic disparity is getting worse and worse. And focusing on community development as also partly an economic justice movement is really incredibly big. And if there's one thing I could think about the book, actually, I said it to a friend of mine recently that it's an easy read, really easy book to read. Concepts, they've brilliantly broken it down to simple ideas. But if you try to pull it off, they are big and explosive. And I'm able to say that personally because I am a disciple of this movement. I'm a disciple of the CCDA. I'm a disciple of these philosophies, and I've tried to incorporate them in my life. And I find that it is hard. It is incredibly hard to relocate and live in the neighborhood, not just because of, in my case, economically, it's expensive to live in the city, but in circumstances like this current pandemic, where I feel the pain of my neighbors. So when I say it's hard, I don't mean that as a bad thing. I say that as a description. You know, it makes me think of Dietrich Bonhoeffer when he had an opportunity to leave Nazi Germany before the persecution of the Jews happened. But before he left, he just kind of figured it would be inappropriate for him to be part of helping Germany heal if he didn't suffer along with the country. And so makes me think that relocation actually is about a determination to really be a neighbor, to recalibrate your life, that being a neighbor and loving your neighbors as yourself really was never a suggestion. And with reconciliation, my goodness, it is hard to help people reconcile with the brokenness that they've been surrounded with. There are many days that I wish I could just wave a magic wand and help people heal from their psychological wounds and the traumas that they've had, but it is not easy. And when it comes to redistribution, again, we live in an unjust economy. Almost everything we buy in some way, shape, or form economically oppresses somebody. So really, even if you just simply try to pull off a small tenet of these 3 R's, you already find yourself busy. Partially my critique about the book, it almost makes it like an invitation that's too easy. I would rather that they would actually be more real with the hardships of what it's like to do this. And I know some of the contributors in the book is tethered in story, and I actually appreciate that there were practitioners that talked about their journey and their experiences. But even then, there is a grittiness to reorienting your life to do ministry and life this way. And because I know some of the people who are part of this movement, I actually know how hard it is, and I've been a practitioner of it for quite a while. It is not easy, but I do acknowledge this. Despite how hard it is, there is a deep sense of purpose when you do it. I take pride, and also I sense a lot of peace that there is a cohesion in how I live life and do ministry, and partially one of the greatest gifts that this philosophy has given me is given me a sense of peace and changed the rhythm of my life, where it really, being a neighbor, is both a distinction of reality and a distinction of my call, and also a distinction of relationship. The book also really tries to wrestle with this idea of holistic ministry, and holistic in the sense of the whole being. And I think one of the downsides of Western ministry or just Christian ministry sometimes is we engage only one portion of someone's life, where being part of a church is either an engagement of the mind or engagement of the heart. But really, as human beings, we have many worries. We carry many issues in our mind. And so really thinking about even reconciling with the past and people healing from traumas, this is all part of community development. But unless you are physically living among people, it's hard to gain that kind of trust. And I think the one thing I wish they talked about in this book is this idea of social equity. You see, I discovered in the city of Toronto, people are kind of suspicious beings. That when someone decides to try to help somebody, there is a sense of suspicion there. It's like, why are you doing this? And if you do this as an outsider, there's an additional layer where people wonder, oh, well, now you really have no reason to do this. But in the city, I know this, that when you posture yourself like a neighbor, there is less animosity. And because I've actually discovered that the city is incredibly communal. In fact, in our Facebook groups in our neighborhood, I'm quite proud to see that my fellow neighbors would find someone in need and then put it out there in the community. Just say, this person needs these things, and in a matter of minutes, we're able to rally around our neighbors. If there's one thing that I do believe is that my city, I don't know if it's the case in other places, but my city has a deep sense of belonging and a sense of neighborhood. And because of that, being a resident and being a neighbor gives us a lot of avenues, gives us a lot of social equity to really serve and also be able to be accurate in our understanding of the needs of our community. There's actually plenty more to say about this book, but for now, these are my thoughts. I hope you enjoy.